Many of you have heard of the Thucydides principle. If you haven't, it is basically a theory. The Thucydides trap was a theory that was put forward by the Harvard political scientist Graham Allison, and he basically posited that, you know, when you have a country that is declining in power and another country that is rising in power and likely going to threaten its primacy, you are likely to have a war. And the name Thucydides trap comes from the Athenian general Thucydides, who basically made that point when he was trying to argue that the rise of Athens and the decline of Sparta would inevitably lead to war, and it did. Now, the reason why I bring all of this up is this is a live issue. We clearly are in a moment of American decline in relative terms, and we clearly are in a moment of China's rise. We will see this theme play out again and again in the next 50, 60 years, our lifetimes basically. And the bit that is worrying is that, you know, there are very few things that, you know, both sides, both parties in America agree on, and the one thing they seem to agree on right now is that China is enemy number one, and there's an increasing rhetoric, sort of a drumbeat, if you will, that worries me, not only here, but also in other parts of the world. Now, China, just a couple of things to know about China is that, you know, from about the 80s to about 2010 or so, 2007, right before the financial crisis, China was growing at double-digit growth rates, and usually when China does very well, it sits tight. It doesn't have to worry about things because its people are getting richer. That's beginning to change. There are a lot of forces within China that are now worrying those of us who watch Chinese politics. And usually when China's in some sort of trouble, there's a likelihood that it could lash out, in part to fuel nationalist sentiment or populist sentiment. So for example, we know now that Chinese growth has slowed down. We know now that the average Chinese income has grown so much, they're a middle-income country, it's much harder to go from middle income to rich than it is from poor to middle income. China's going to slow down. China's also getting old. You know, in the next 15 years, about 70 million Chinese will drop out of the workforce. About 130 million Chinese will become senior citizens and stop working. The nature of China is going to change. And that means China will have to look outside its borders to the rest of the world for other ways in which to keep its people happy. And that worries me because in the last couple of years during the pandemic, we have seen a more aggressive China. It's picked fights with India. Look at Taiwan, where there have been threats for war. Look at Hong Kong, with a crackdown on freedom of speech there. You look at Chinese investments in Africa. Just last week, China took over a Ugandan airport in lieu of a loan that wasn't paid off. China's been building secretly villages in Bhutan that no one talks about but are there because you can see them on geospatial maps. All of this is immensely worrying, and I guess the bit that worries me the most is that when you have a situation where you have a rising power, a declining power, you have a lot of rhetoric that is, you know, bombastic, there is a chance that things could get out of hand. I'm quite hopeful that it won't. I'm very hopeful, in fact, because we have very good diplomats around the world who are working very hard to make sure that there are off-ramps, there are diplomatic sort of pressure valves to ensure that things don't go where they shouldn't. But it does worry me, and I think it's good for all of us to know about that.